Clear here with a knife review for you. Today we're going to take a look at this knife from QSP. You can see the label right there. There's kind of a good look for you. This knife was sent to me for review by the company QSP. They're a Chinese company selling on Amazon. You know, kind of reminds me of the through night business model. Fairly budget-friendly stuff. They've got a couple of decent designs. And so since I'm always kind of on the lookout for decent budget stuff to share with you guys, I was quite happy to check this knife out. And I've been able to play with it for a little while now. Cut a bunch of stuff, you know, fiddle with it, carry it and all that. And I've got to share some thoughts with you about all that. So, by the way, I will put a link in the description box of where you can pick one of these up for yourself. At this point, they're only on Amazon. I don't know if that's going to be it forever or if that's just, you know, a starting point for them. But either way, there will be an Amazon.com link down below. Let's start off with size and weight, which is 8.5 inches overall, 3 11/16 on the blade length, 4 3/4 inches on the handle. And some of you really like to know, what is the grip area? So I took a measurement from here, which is where your front finger is going to end up, to the back of the handle here. And what you get there is 4 1/8. Now, the one thing that I do need to share with you guys, this knife is a little hefty for its size. And you can see there's some fairly substantial G10 liners there, as well as non-milled out stainless. I mean, let's get this right. G10 scales and stainless steel liners, which are not milled out, and a reasonably thick blade stock as well. So just kind of looking at this knife, you can probably guess that it's a little hefty, and you'd be right about that. This is 5.7 ounces, which is not unheard of for a knife of this size, but it is a little hefty, and we'll have some other knives to compare to kind of, you know, give you a context for that. Let's take a look at this blade. I definitely like this blade design. It's sort of a drop point, spear point-ish type of thing with a swedge on top. Nice flat grind, very fine point there. I may have to make sure that's going to focus for you. There you go. So very fine point. In fact, you know, you'll notice it is extremely fine, which could be a bit of an issue if you go to do anything too, you know, too rough with this knife. There would be a chance of breaking that tip off, or if you drop it. I don't know if even any of you had this fairly negative experience, but if you drop your knife on the sidewalk, it's going to be a bad day most of the time. And this one definitely has a good risk of breaking that tip off. Anyway, I didn't want to spend my whole discussion just on that. This is 440C blade steel. We've got a pretty thin grind here, so it comes down to a decently thin edge geometry. And it does come very sharp. The other thing I will say about this blade, actually a couple more things. They've done a good job on the plunge grind. And look, this is a budget knife and they've gotten the plunge grind right. So it's a little frustrating when more expensive knives don't do that. I also like the way they've extended this jimping well out onto the blade here to give me lots of room for my thumb. I know that's a bit of an ergonomic point, but it's definitely part of blade design because you don't want to bring this swedge too far back and take away from my ability to be able to have some purchase for my thumb in a saber grip. So in terms of performance on this blade, you know, 440C is a decent budget steel. It's not the end all and be all, but I consider it a little better than, say, HCR 13 MOV or AUS 8. It's not going to be as good as 14C28N. It's not going to be as good as D2, certainly not as good as D2. Anyway, in terms of actual use and performance, this is a pretty well-balanced blade with that one exception that I already talked about there on the tip. It does slice really, really nicely. So, you know, you can slice up an apple reasonably well. It's not the best for that option, but certainly can do the job. In terms of, you know, wood carving, cardboard cutting, that kind of thing, it's going to be just fine. I didn't have any issues with any of the things I tried to cut. And there are certainly knives, and I always share this with you guys, but there are definitely knives where you try to do something like that and it's just not well suited to it. This is a pretty versatile blade and I do appreciate that. By the way, while we're on that point, this does come in a black coated blade as well as, you know, most of the QSP models. In fact, if you go and look on Amazon, you'll find a lot of them are in black. And if you click over to the variations that are available, you can find a satin blade. So you'll see that, especially, don't think that I didn't link to the right knife just in case you go and check that out and see a black blade. It's just, there's another variation available in the satin, which is what I opted for. Now, the action on this for the price point is pretty darn nice. The detent is dialed in. The flipping action is smooth. It is on bearings. And so that aspect is, something I'm, pretty impressed by. It's nice, to me, it's nice when you get a budget knife that has a pretty good action. One of the things that companies can scrimp on, or often, can't afford to keep up those high, tolerances and specifications, is when you get to the pivot, they've got to let some things pass. So you end up getting, those budget knives, the under $50 knives that, there tends to be some variation. This seems to be pretty good. And I've checked out a few other reviews and most people seem to be happy with it. So it seems like they're doing a consistent job on the action here. And certainly I'm pretty happy with it. Now I will say I have a really hard time getting this knife to open with a thumb deployment in that little opening. I just need a little more space there. I can do it, but it's really tough. Obviously it flips really well, and that's probably, 99% of how I'm going to open it. Let me try. No, I can't do. I've tried a couple of times to do a middle finger flick there and I just can't do it. So that's not going to work, at least for me. Maybe some of you will be able to have no problems with that. One other point here, and that is if you take a look at the lock bar, you can see there is a bit of a relief cut, but it's not too big, so you're not sacrificing too much by way of strength. And they have given me a little bit of space here to get my thumb in there and access the lock bar, which I do like. Also, while we're on that, the tension on that lock bar is not too crazy, so it's pretty comfortable to push out of the way and disengage. So all of that stuff is pretty good. Action overall, I definitely have no complaints. The only thing I can't do is, and maybe this is just my fat fingers, but I can't get my fingers in there and open it very well using the little opening hole here. I have to use the flipper tab almost exclusively. All right, let's talk about the handle. On the handle, we have G10 backspacer, G10 scales, and stainless steel liners. It is a pretty standard fare. There's no milling inside of there. This is a pretty standard knife construction, but it is very solidly built. The fit and finish seems pretty darn good. Nothing seems way out of place, or nothing is proud or inset that shouldn't be. So, things match up pretty well. It overall seems pretty well put together. So from a construction standpoint, I should say, I don't have too many issues. I will say from an ergonomic standpoint, there is one complaint that I have. Overall, the jimping is great. It's nice and hand-filling, and you would expect it to be, but I found I get a little bit of a hot spot from the way that they've done this lanyard loop. So see how, I don't know, it's just, if you look at the G10, you can see it's a fairly abrupt corner there, and it just kind of rises up. I would like to have seen this just flush, like just get rid of this altogether. I feel like the knife would have been a little more comfortable in hand than it is. As it stands, it's definitely not a problem. As I say, all the cutting, you can see, I've been cutting with this just this morning, and there's no marks or anything on my hand, so no big issues there. You do have the movable clip, tip up carry left or right side, which is a nice option to see. Seems like there's a bit of a trend away from having the movable clip, and I'm not sure why companies are doing that. It's definitely something that lefties appreciate, to be able to have that knife on the other side, or even righties who carry their knife on their weak side because they carry something else in that pocket, a wallet, or they carry a firearm on the right side, or whatever else. So having that movable is a nice touch. The one thing I will say about this aesthetically, okay, and maybe I'm being overly picky here, but stylistically, I like these milled lines here in the bottom. I don't like the way the top one looks. I think for consistency, it needs to be there, but I really would have liked to see it kind of finished off. And I know that would have messed up the inset on that screw, but I would have liked to see the extra attention to just, have this continue along, and then either replace that screw in a different location, or adjust the length of it to accommodate the sort of angle that's created there. That's just me, and again, that's pretty subjective, so I can't really say too much about it. But overall, I definitely I like the look of this knife. I think they've done a decent job, and the materials are there, and overall it's pretty comfortable. So that's my take on the sort of design and construction aspect of the handle. Let's go ahead and grab some comparisons. First off, let me throw in a couple of knives that are not in the same price category, but people are very familiar with, to give you just an idea of where this lands size-wise. So there's a pair of two. There we go. There's a pair of two, and there is a Cold Steel American Lawman. Both great EDC options. They're going to be a little lighter use, a little lighter weight, and still pretty well built. But the reason I'm bringing these in more is to show this is a little larger knife. One thing that I always feel like I need to comment on, even though I know you guys are well familiar with it, is the fact that the Para 2 is woefully deficient in blade length. You know, we have a knife that is only a teeny little bit bigger than the Para 2, and yet all that extra cutting edge. So that is, of course, one of the failings of the Para 2 that's fairly well documented. Now, I do have some other comparisons that I want to bring in here. Foremost among them would definitely be the Rat Model 1. This is, of course, the Rat Model 1 in D2 and carbon fiber. And it's a fairly similar weighted knife. That's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it in, just to say, you know, don't be too put off by the 5.7 ounces, because the Rat Model 1 is like 5.5 ounces, and everyone loves it, myself included. Certainly a similar, you know, certainly similar in terms of budget. I think these go for like 38 bucks on Amazon. These go for, I don't know if they're available on Amazon. Certainly the OS 8 version is. These probably go for around 40, I don't know. Anyway, haven't bought a Rat 1 in a while. I do want to throw in a couple of other budget offerings. I think this knife compares to some of the stuff that Real Steel and Rake Knives is doing. So here is on loan from my friend Bradley, a Real Steel G3 Puko. Great little knife, amazing action on this knife. It definitely is hitting well above its weight when it comes to the action. Finally, let's pull out a couple of other sort of budget competitors, Chinese-made budget knives. We've got a couple of Gonzo / Firebird knives here. So this guy is going to be, I don't know what model this is. Let's see here. This is the F761. Pretty decent design here. Very high flat grind, 440C. Okay, similar construction in terms of, I know the lock is different, but you know, G10 over stainless steel liners. So that's certainly something to maybe take a look at. What else have we got? We've got another Firebird here. This is the 769. Very close in terms of size. And in fact, you know, I would put these in a similar class as well. The Gonzos are going to come in a little cheaper, I believe. And finally, I recently reviewed this knife because I thought it was a nice move by Gonzo. This is the 749. So there's that guy for comparison as well. Okay. By the way, this one does have a bearing pivot, which is one of the reasons I brought it in for comparison. All right, now let's get to my final thoughts on this knife. Is it well built? Yes. Is it my favorite steel? No. Is it priced right? Yeah, pretty close to where it ought to be. $38 is certainly not breaking the bank, and you are getting a pretty nice action and overall pretty well-built knife for that price. Where do I see this knife landing? Who's going to want a knife like this? Well, anyone who likes budget stuff, certainly. Anyone who just wants a decent folding knife that's going to perform overly pretty darn well. Are there knives that I would recommend above this? Yeah, there are a couple, you know, not the least of which would be the Rat Model 1. But if you like this and you're interested in it, you know, definitely I think you're very safe buying a knife like this. I think you're going to be very happy with it. Good cutting performance, really good, you know, overall construction and durability, pretty ergonomic, you know, very good performance out of the blade. So there you go, guys. That's my overall take on this knife. I think it's pretty well done. I think it's well suited to EDC, especially if you're, you know, if you use your EDC knife a little heavily, then I think you'll be just fine doing that. Thank you to QSP for sending this along for review. As I said, use the links down below. It does help out the channel. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.